Ever wonder what everyone's doing on their phones? They're banking with Bank of America. They're saving, planning, and budgeting all before dessert.
Digital tools so impressive, you just can't stop banking. What would you like the power to do?
Thank you, guys. Let's jump right in. Carolina, let's start with you. You know, I think we all looked with amazement at the incredible physical revitalization of Michigan Central. I mean, so much of what was pictured about the region's decline was that. And much more importantly, it's such a shining symbol of the community's social and physical revitalization, but it's more than that, much more than that. It is an incredible investment in this region's innovation future. Now, I know you've been working hard at that. We are actually members of New Lab, so we love New Lab. We work out of New Lab. We have a joint project with you guys housed over at Michigan Central. But one of the things you've been focusing on is bolstering the region's capability in critical fields like advanced mobility and AI and climate and sustainability. Maybe you want to talk about that. But also, I think you and your team have been trying to identify these gaps in the innovation ecosystem. And folks, I saw this in Pittsburgh. I mentioned I lived in Pittsburgh. You know, for 20 years at Carnegie Mellon, we were churning out some of the most important internet search technologies, advanced mobility technology. Uber actually moved the thing out to Carnegie Mellon, all sorts of technology. And when we would get the startups created, they would move because we had gaps. And you seem to be identifying, or not only the potential, but some of these gaps. So why don't you share with us some of the findings and some of your sensibilities about what are incredible assets to build on in this innovation ecosystem and where some of the gaps might be that we can together try to solve?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the kind words about Michigan Central. I think the physical revitalization of Michigan Central has allowed us to build this innovation platform, right? You know, we are attracting startups, and in order to do that, you have to have kind of the labs and the workspace, as you know. We have the policy infrastructure where you can test in the real world on the streets and in the air. And then the social infrastructure with the urban context that we're building in. You layer that with startups and industry partners and academics, and you have this potential to create these creative collisions, right? Which didn't exist before in our ecosystem. But the physical place is not, as you point out, where we have to spend the time. It's in closing the gaps that exist in this ecosystem. Because as hard as it is to get, right now, we have about 135 startups. We have a founding, a community builder that's launching tomorrow, Saturday, because today's Thursday, that's launching that has 37 new founders in them. These founders need tools. And the gaps in the Michigan's ecosystem are what we're trying to fill. So our partnership with the state, it's amazing what a $10,000, $25,000 grant will do for these companies to make the decision to come here, and then once they're here, to keep them here. We, early last year, we're seeing them being courted by other people, and the startups have to go where that money is. And so together we're working. Kofi, before we came out, you mentioned about one of the startups that you knew was at a point that needed something more. And so that collaboration and working together is what we have to do in order to keep the startups here. I think venture capital is another one. I mean, We're doing a ton to encourage investment here, locating here, because the startups are looking for that. And then I can't say it, I'll say it again, our team, Mark D. Laverne, who's on my team, has spent an enormous amount of time with key folks from your all team, bringing this ecosystem together, because we can't compete. We have to be able to collaborate, because that's the only way we're going to keep these startups here. The ecosystem's fragile.
Yeah, and Kofi, let's turn to you, because I think these two things are kind of nested. One of the things I've heard, and Carolina, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that many of the auto companies, including Ford, had these wonderful suburban campuses, but they weren't, for many people, they're great. But for these young tech people who are coming from other regions, often not married or newly married, they want the excitement. And look, this is incredible. What's happened in downtown Detroit, like every time I come here, the restaurants are packed. It's fun to go out. When there's a game day, it's completely, like it has an energy to it. And Kofi, you've spent time in lots of places. You spent a lot of time in the Bay Area. And one of the things you've noticed and I've noticed together is, and I didn't talk about this, I talked about the old model being business-driven or corporate-driven, but it was also very suburban. The idea was in the 50s and 60s, if you put your research development lab out in a beautiful green area, you know, where the researchers could talk and go for walks and they'd be in a natural environment, and everything was suburbanizing. But what we've seen, what you've seen, maybe over the past decade, and a guy I know called this the nerd, he actually called the suburban Nerdistan, was a funny name he made for it. But we began to see these companies move back to urban centers. We saw that in the shift from Silicon, folks, by the way, there is much more venture capital investment now in downtown San Francisco and startups, even with all of what we hear about the problems in San Francisco. I think 50% of the artificial intelligence companies are in and around the downtown of San Francisco, the new ones. New York, which didn't have any venture capital startups, now is number 2 behind San Francisco. And it's all in these areas of Manhattan and Brooklyn, London. We can go on and on, Stockholm, Berlin. Talk a little bit, tell us a little bit, because you've done so much at Bedrock to kind of do revitalization, retail, commercial, you know, hospitality, hotels, residential. But I think you also see kind of innovation shifting to a more urban center. So tell us more about what you're seeing there.
Well, I would say first and foremost, I don't know that I could overestimate the importance of a center city in thinking about innovation and the innovation ecosystem, primarily because of what the center city provides. If you think in terms of the average creator, what they're looking for after 7 o'clock is activity, something to stimulate themselves. And we believe, certainly Detroit has all the momentum and energy and vibrancy that they're looking for. And it's critically important, I think, as I think about how we position ourselves, how we collaborate through the corridor to Ann Arbor, how we collaborate with Michigan State, how we certainly collaborate with Henry Ford and all the other potential innovators. It's critically important to understand that it is the center city, which in this case is Detroit, that will provide the fundamental urban amenities that are so necessary for these innovators to want to grow their companies here. And that's what I would say. And I would also just say that one of the, I think, more interesting facts around Bedrock and our ability to drive the innovation decisions in this region is fundamentally because of the unique nature of our portfolio. I don't know, Richard, you may know, but I doubt that there is any other private entity that holds as much urban portfolio of connected buildings and spaces anywhere across such a variety of use types, retail, office, industrial, and residential. And I would just say that we position ourselves as a platform for innovators to come in and try out the building tech that they're thinking about, because they only have to talk to one person or one company in order to look at the variety of opportunities. They only have to talk to us about how to connect perhaps their EV vehicle, which may be beginning to lose battery, and how can they perhaps charge in the infrastructure that exists. So those two things, the importance of Detroit, and frankly, in this particular instance, the fundamental uniqueness of having a developer like Bedrock that owns so much property in the downtown location.
And I want to follow up on this. In the report, look, in 15 minutes I couldn't cover any. In the report, I call out 2 technology fields. Now, there's other ones that are wonderful in this region, fantastic, but there are 2 that have a unique opportunity. One is, of course, with an automotive sector, advanced mobility. The other one, I just want you to reflect on this, I call it urban innovation or urban technology. And the idea being, you know, 200 years ago, everyone worked on farms, and farms were very inefficient. And then we applied ourselves with new technologies, research and development. We made farms so efficient that 1% of the workforce can produce all the food we eat. Manufacturing, this is more clear. I mean, Henry Ford with the assembly line. Manufacturing was done in little shops. It was very inefficient. It took 70% of our workforce. Now 5 to 6% of our workforce work in direct production. The great platform of the innovation age is what you called the city center, the urban platform. And I don't, but give folks a sense of when you said it's advanced mobility and more. It's building technology. It's urban innovation. It's making the city more effective in the way people get around. Maybe just a few minutes if you can reflect on this.
Well, think of what will happen maybe a few years from now when the last mile logistics is a big problem. Yep. Last mile logistics, you got an EV vans that are beginning to deliver property, parcels, goods to the downtown area, and then they find that their battery is beginning to go down. Where do they charge? Well, folks like us are working with companies to figure out, well, perhaps there's a way we can intervene and work with those companies so they can recharge even as they're delivering. We've had tremendous success with our Detroit Smart Parking Lab, where folks are working within our parking spaces in the assembly parking garage, really innovating and creating the new technology for folks, how to recharge their batteries in a really innovative way. Maybe the batteries, the charging stations need to come to the car. So they're really interesting innovations. But actually, even perhaps bigger than all that is, we have 8 million square feet of portfolio downtown, all connected and adjacent, and we have to connect them to create these building efficiencies that we absolutely need to manage our energy. I mean, certainly Henry Ford can appreciate this is your campus. You have to think about these things. So we actually have the ability to monitor the energy and the efficiencies throughout these assets. And so any innovator who's thinking along the lines of how do we better manage our energy systems, how do we just monitor our buildings, we're able, and we have created a space in downtown Detroit through the Urban Technology Exchange where we have about 20 innovators actually looking at different innovations using our buildings as essentially the laboratory. We've anonymized the data, and they're able to take that information and test their systems to see how their particular innovations may be improving our energy efficiency.
Bob, for you lead or help to lead an incredible health system. I was saying to you when we visit here, we find the healthcare delivery for our kids to be second to none in this region. And I want you to talk a little bit about how important healthcare and this whole wellness revolution is to attracting talent, but I think at Henry Ford you've kind of cracked the code on something. Most healthcare systems focus on delivering healthcare. You've adopted economic development which is kind of, in some ways it's like, what? Healthcare system doing economic development, but you know, with your destination project and other things, you've really adopted economic development, innovation, creating jobs, talent attraction as kind of a core mission. Why don't you tell us why and what are the benefits for doing that? In some way we might be able to leverage that.
Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. And I will answer that by simply saying it starts with the philosophy of why you exist as a company. And we really believe that we exist as a population health enterprise. And if you really embrace population health and your role to elevate the health of a community, then you come to realize that no matter how excellent your care is in a hospital setting, it's a relatively small piece of what drives the overall health. What does drive the overall health of an economy is strong education and academic access, strong access to jobs, particularly middle-class jobs, and then sites that become a destination and a desire for people to congregate and create density. I mean, there's all of those assets that really go into population health. So we take it on our mission to be the best place if you are facing dire healthcare circumstances. But we also believe it's our role to elevate population. So we partner with schools on academic journeys. We partner with everyone on this stage on economic development so that we are creating the next generation of reliable jobs. We're focusing on innovation and partnering with some of the startup companies at Michigan Central for what's the autonomous version and applicability for healthcare? What's the AI applicability to healthcare? As long as we can position ourselves as a region to be the driver of that kind of thinking, then there's no stopping us. And I think it's got to be a purposefulness around partnerships. and a can't even say that word twice, purposefulness around doing more than just your core business, but doing your core business plus. And then the last thing I would add is that an academic, state-of-the-art medical center is also important for corporations around the world in driving decisions of where they're going to make their next investment. And I sit on enough forums where I've seen that come to real life, where they're looking, do we have great academic centers for our employees and their families, and do we have great access to healthcare? So building a campus that really speaks to that is going to help every single other person attract new companies to the area.
John, you lead a high-tech company in Ann Arbor, and we're in Detroit today, so one thing I want you to talk about is what's happening, not just in your company, but what's happening in the high-tech scene in Ann Arbor, which is pretty great, and not just in terms of attracting startups, you're attracting big companies in AI and all these high-tech companies that want to be near this engine in Ann Arbor. Tell us a little bit about how that's happening and what you might see as this connection we've talked about between Ann Arbor and
Sure, happy to do that. And good morning, everybody. Great to see you. First of all, I want to credit the Detroit Chamber with including Ann Arbor in this program and embracing Ann Arbor. It's really cool to see the University of Michigan logo alongside such incredible organizations. It's also wonderful to be part of this conversation. I think it shows that this innovation ecosystem we're building across Southeast Michigan is real, and that's really exciting, and it includes Ann Arbor as an integral part. So I'm going to talk about Ann Arbor in the context of who the heck is KLA, this company that I work for, and how did we choose to go there? So KLA has actually been around for almost 50 years. Semiconductor chips don't happen without us, simply put. We do inspection and measurement of all of the semiconductor chips. We're the leading manufacturer of inspection and measurement equipment. And if you walked into a semiconductor fab literally anywhere in the world, including Michigan, Taiwan, Singapore, Korea, et cetera, you'd find KLA tools all around the factory. We've been in Silicon Valley for many, many years. We were founded in Milpitas, California. We have our largest facility there. About 7 years ago, our CEO came to the realization that it's really hard to attract and retain talent in Silicon Valley, particularly in competitive fields like AI. And so we started a project to find a new location for a second headquarters. We will always be in Silicon Valley. It's our heritage. It's where we were built. But we wanted to find a new place that had an incredible population of engineering talent, a lower cost of living, a high quality of life, and international accessibility. So we started with a very long list. We considered all those criteria. We hired a professional site selection consultant to run the search. We narrowed it down to a very small subset of those communities. We did a very thoughtful site visit, considered all the different considerations in the region. We visited with many stakeholders, and we ended up choosing Ann Arbor. Back in 2018, we purchased an 18-acre parcel of land from the University of Michigan in close proximity to North Campus. So we found Southeast Michigan, and we found Ann Arbor specifically for the incredible engineering talent that's here. We also came to Southeast Michigan because of the international accessibility we have through Detroit Metro Airport. So when you think about our region, that is a huge selling point, the Delta nonstop flights to Asia, where the vast majority of KLA's customers are currently located. So I think all of those considerations tell the story of why Ann Arbor is a compelling place to do business, a compelling place to attend school, a compelling place to live. It's a community that has very high quality schools, a very high level of education, compared to the high cost areas like San Francisco, San Jose, New York. It has a relatively low cost of living, even though it's a high cost of living compared to other places in Michigan. You really can't talk about Ann Arbor without focusing on the University of Michigan, the largest employer in the county. The university is doing some incredible things in the community, expanding with plans for a tech park and innovation ecosystem in Northeast Ann Arbor under President Ono's leadership, now expanding in Detroit with the Detroit Innovation Center and partnerships here, which is very exciting. So it's a really exciting time to be in Ann Arbor, and as you noted, the tech sector in Ann Arbor is growing with KLA and a number of other companies choosing to locate large facilities there. I want to mention one other thing, and that's the issue of transit. And Richard, you cover this in your report. If there's a weakness that we have in the ecosystem, obviously there are a number of things that we're working on, but transit is one that really comes to mind for folks in Ann Arbor. This region is somewhat unique in the fact that it's so broad, right? We sit here 40 miles from Ann Arbor. You compare that to Boston or Pittsburgh, the geographic expanse of this region is real, right? And it can be hard to attract talent, particularly in the Gen Z workforce. These people don't really want to drive. They're not interested in the lifestyle that we've all become accustomed to in Southeast Michigan. So I think it's exciting to see some conversations underway and some legislation through the state level to increase transit accessibility and availability in the region. I think if we can take it to the next level and make rail transit a reality, that would really help us to attract workforce and future corporate development opportunities.
Okay, quickly, less than a minute each, 30 seconds each. What do you think is the critical next step we could take to build this Detroit Ann Arbor University Business Research Corridor? Start with you, Kofi.
Well, I got to say that if indeed that corridor is the most critical piece, recognizing that fundamentally you have a center city, Detroit, that provides all the amenities, et cetera, the residential, et cetera, the potential for office growth, we have to connect through public transit. I can't disagree. I mean, we have to come together, collaborate, and absolutely crack the nut of how to expand our public transit in and throughout the city, and also to outside to Ann Arbor and Lansing.
John?
Agree with everything Kofi said. I think a centralized, very well-connected leadership team,
100%.
as you noted in your report,
100%.
has to be there to make it happen.
And that's for you to decide, but 100% that organization is needed. Carolina?
I'd like to start with a bus stop from the A2D2 at Michigan Central. That would be great to have a stop there. But I would say,
absolutely.
I would say that we need to align on the assets that we have and how do we enhance the assets that we have that will enable our technology strategies if we're going to be on the national stage or the global stage. I also think that we have to look at new opportunities where we can do applied research and bring the universities in at the center and allow for that tech transfer.
I think there's three things. Transit is clearly number one in my mind. Number two is forums that bring together unusual suspects, people from different industries that aren't used to working with each other, that can find there's a whole new innovative thread by coming together and creating something that has never been created before. And the third is, I think we need to think bigger. We've got an incredible university in Lansing with Michigan State University, Wayne State University, and U of M, and we need to make that an intimate powerhouse working on our behalf.
The trilogy and more, not just the trilogy and more are the engine. They're the anchors, like your medical center, like the airport. The thing that I've learned from you, which I think is quite interesting, and I kind of touch on it in the report, but it's so much better to talk about this, is the need for this group. Obviously, this group, what I call an alliance, this organization. Sandy mentioned it. But it's interesting. How many of you mentioned transit, mobility, getting around, affordability? Kofi, you said new construction technology. I am thinking this whole idea of urban innovation and urban technology is kind of a grand project, where what better place than Detroit and the region to begin to really experiment. What is the city of the future? What are those technologies in mobility and building? We have to build more. What are the modalities for building, right? Michigan Central, the universities, how do you use data to do that? New infrastructure. I think this could be the test bed. And it's mobility, of course, but it's beyond, you know what it is? Could we be in this corridor the place that invents the new ways of living and working, that and moving around that people are searching for? Look, you did it once a century ago, and you did it in a way which was echoed in a way that was more inclusive. And I try to touch on this. It wasn't just about building innovations for innovators. It was creating a platform, in that case automotive and more, related industries that could build up the bottom. Anyway, you guys have been incredible. Like, thanks to each and every one of you for being so generous with your time and your ideas. It's just a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Ever wonder what everyone's doing on their phones? They're banking with Bank of America. They're saving, planning, and budgeting all before dessert.
Digital tools so impressive, you just can't stop banking. What would you like the power to do?